Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Through the Bible. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sonkrant. Today we will be going through the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, Part 2. We will be reading from Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. And last week, this is Part 2. Last week we talked about the Tree of Life. Today we will talk about the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. Picking back up again in Genesis chapter 2, verse 9. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil presents the tree of death. Man was created a free moral agent. Man's agency had to be tested, so the tree of knowledge of good and evil would serve as that tool for testing. The word good carries with it a very negative connotation. It is speaking of man's attempt to bring about his or her own salvation through good works, such as, for example, water baptism, fasting, doing charitable work, church attendance, and etc. These are good works. There's nothing wrong with them whatsoever, but those works, as good as they are, will never bring about salvation. Just think about it. If works could bring about salvation, then the atonement of Jesus Christ on the cross was done completely in vain. Man only has two choices. That is, accept the tree of life, which is Jesus Christ and his atoning work on the cross, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the tree of death, which leads to man's separation from God and eternal damnation in hell forever and ever. The choice is yours. You could choose life, which is Jesus Christ, and the cross, and that alone, or the knowledge of good and evil, which again will continue, which brings about spiritual death and you being lost for eternity. Next week we will be talking about the fall of man, starting in Genesis chapter 3. Don't forget, I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to leave your comments, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to get further notifications, ring that notification bell. God willing, see you next week. Love you all. Thank you, and God bless.